The silent withdrawal, the stellar convergence floated like a crystalline jewel against the cosmic void, its translucent spires reaching toward distant nebulae. Inside the station's grand assembly hall, representatives from 23 species gathered for what many considered a routine quarterly meeting. Ambassador Marcus Rivera stood at the edge of the human delegation area, his weathered face betraying none of the frustration that had been building for months. Behind him, his team of 12 specialists remained perfectly still, their dark blue uniforms a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garb worn by the other species. Supreme Arbiter Corthax dominated the center of the chamber. The Zephyr stood nearly 3 meters tall, his 4 arms folded in what his species considered a gesture of patient wisdom. His scaled skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that indicated his mood, currently a deep purple of supreme confidence. Around him, the other senior council members arranged themselves according to their species' preference for atmospheric conditions. The aquatic hydrants floated in their pressurized spheres, while the gaseous netheri swirled within containment, fields that kept their particulate forms stable. Marcus had waited 3 hours for his turn to address the assembly. The council had spent that time discussing trade regulations for synthetic proteins and debating the proper orbital distances for mining stations. Important matters, perhaps, but nothing compared to what humanity had discovered in the outer reaches of known space. When his moment finally arrived, Marcus stepped forward with measured steps, activating the holographic display system with a simple gesture. The chamber filled with images of devastation. Entire colonies reduced to empty husks, their populations vanished without trace, ships floating dead in space, their crews gone but all systems intact. The phenomena humanity had labeled the Shadow Plague was spreading inward from the galaxy's edge, and it was accelerating. Marcus spoke clearly, his voice carrying across the vast chamber without need for amplification. He explained how human deep space scouts had first encountered the anomaly 6 months ago. He detailed the patterns they had identified, the defensive measures they had developed, and most importantly, the evidence that this was not a natural phenomenon but a targeted assault by an unknown intelligence. The reaction from the council was immediate and dismissive. Councillor Vrex of the Manthari chittered what passed for laughter among his insectoid people. His translator converted the sound into words that dripped with condescension. The young humans see shadows in the darkness and imagine monsters. How typical of a species barely past its infancy to create phantoms from sensor glitches and equipment failures. Other council members joined in the dismissal. The crystalline shardlings harmonized their disagreement in frequencies that made the air itself seem to reject Marcus's presentation. The plant-based Florinae rustled their fronds in what they considered gentle amusement at human paranoia. Even the normally neutral observers, beings of pure energy contained within mechanical shells, pulsed with skeptical patterns. Corthax raised his primary arms, calling for order. His voice resonated through the chamber with the authority of 10,000 years of Zealothian dominance in galactic affairs. Ambassador Rivera, while we appreciate humanity's enthusiasm for contributing to galactic security, we must remind you that your species has been spacefaring for less than a century. The Zealothians have guided this galaxy for 3 millennia. The Hydrons have explored these stars for 5,000 years. The Netheri have existed since before your son was born. Do you truly believe that you have discovered something that has escaped our notice? Marcus remained calm, though his jaw tightened slightly. He presented additional data, showing energy signatures unlike anything in the Council's databases. offered to share the defensive protocols humanity had developed. He even volunteered human ships to lead reconnaissance missions to gather more evidence. Each offer was met with increasing condescension. Councillor Thiessen of the Hydrons bubbled dismissively in her sphere. Perhaps humans should focus on managing their 3 small colonies before presuming to advise the Council on matters of galactic importance. Your species has much to learn about proper civilization. This obsession with imaginary threats reveals your primitive nature, always looking for enemies, always preparing for wars that exist only in your limited understanding. The formal vote was called. Should the Council allocate resources to investigate the human claims about this so-called shadow plague? The result was unanimous. 22 species voted against. Only humanity voted in favor. The official record would show that the Council had considered and rejected the human proposal as unsubstantiated paranoia typical of an immature species. Marcus gathered his materials slowly, deliberately. His team followed his lead, packing their equipment with mechanical precision. Before leaving, Marcus turned to address the assembly one final time. His voice carried no anger, no threat, only a cold statement of fact. The Galactic Council has made its position clear. Humanity accepts the wisdom of our elders. We will no longer burden this assembly with our primitive concerns. As requested, we will focus on our own small territories and leave galactic matters to those species that Council deems qualified. Something in his tone made several Council members shift uncomfortably. Councillor Urix of the Ethereals flickered, with uncertain colors. Surely humanity will continue to participate in Council proceedings. Your species has obligations under the Galactic Charter. Marcus nodded once. We will fulfill every obligation required by the Charter. Nothing more, nothing less. Humanity will attend all mandatory sessions. We will pay our assessed fees. We will follow all Council directives that apply to us. But as the Council has made abundantly clear, our input on matters of importance is neither needed nor wanted. We will respect that judgment. The human delegation filed out in perfect formation. Not one looked back. In the silence that followed their departure, Corthax's scales shifted to a lighter shade of purple, indicating satisfaction. The humans finally understand their place. This is progress. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, they will be ready for actual responsibility. The other Council members murmured agreement, though a few of the younger representatives seemed troubled. Junior Councillor Xylan of the Cognari, a species known for their predictive abilities, experienced a brief sensation of unease. Her 3 minds synchronized to process the feeling, but she couldn't identify its source. She dismissed it as residual emotional contamination from proximity to the humans. Life in the galaxy continued as it had for millennia. Trade ships moved along established routes. Colony ships departed for new worlds. Research stations probed the mysteries of space. The Council met every 10 cycles to discuss and debate and decide the fate of trillions. The humans attended every meeting, sitting silently in their designated area, taking notes but never speaking unless directly asked a procedural question. But changes began to manifest in small ways. A Zealothian cargo fleet reported unusual delays. In the Terminus sector, their navigation systems seemed unable to plot efficient routes through areas that had been perfectly mapped for centuries. A Hydron science vessel disappeared near the edge of human space, though they had been nowhere near any human colonies. Mining operations in the neutral zone began reporting equipment failures at rates far exceeding normal parameters. The Council dismissed these incidents as coincidence. After all, space was vast and dangerous. Ships disappeared. Equipment failed. These things had always happened and always would. The advanced species had protocols for handling such minor inconveniences. They didn't need input from primitive humans who saw imaginary plagues in every shadow. 6 months passed. The incidents grew more frequent, but remained seemingly unconnected. Pirate activity increased in sectors that had been peaceful for generations. But the pirates seemed to know exactly when and where Council security forces would patrol. Communication relays failed at critical moments, always just long enough to disrupt important negotiations or emergency responses. Trade agreements collapsed when vital shipments arrived late or not at all. During one particularly frustrating council session, Councillor Rex clicked his mandibles in agitation. It's as if the galaxy itself has become hostile to our efforts. Every solution we implement fails. Every strategy we devise is countered before we can execute it. Corthax maintained his composure, though his scales had taken on a darker purple that indicated concern. These are temporary setbacks. The Council has weathered far worse over the millennia. We do not need to panic over what amounts to a string of unfortunate coincidences in their silent corner. The human delegation continued taking notes. They recorded every discussion, every decision, every dismissal of the growing crisis. They did not offer suggestions. They did not volunteer assistance. They simply observed, as they had been told to do. Asterisk, the price of arrogance, the shadow. Plague struck the Zelethian homeworld exactly 1 year after humanity's warning had been dismissed. It began in the outer colonies of the Zeleth cities found empty. Their inhabitants vanished between one communication cycle and the next. The technology remained functional. Even the artificial intelligences continued their programmed tasks. But every biological Zelethian had simply ceased to exist. Corthax himself led the emergency session, his scales now a deep black of barely controlled fear. In 3 days, 12 billion Zelethians had vanished from 17 worlds. The plague, for lack of a better term, was moving toward their core worlds at a rate that defied comprehension. No force field could stop it. No weapon could target it. It was as if space itself had become hostile to Zelethian life. The High reported similar disasters beginning in their outer territories. The Netheri found entire gas giant colonies dispersing into nothingness. Even the ancient ethereals discovered regions of space where their energy forms simply unraveled. The shadow plague was no longer a human delusion, it had become an existential threat to every advanced species in the galaxy. Counselor Theson's translation sphere crackled with desperation. We must pool all our knowledge, all our resources. Every species must contribute their best scientists, their most advanced technology. Surely together we can find a solution to this crisis. For 6 months, the Council's greatest minds worked. Without rest, they threw every piece of advanced technology, every scientific theory, every desperate strategy at the advancing plague. Nothing worked. The phenomenon adapted to every countermeasure, learned from every attempt to stop it. It was not random or mindless, it was intelligent, purposeful, and seemingly unstoppable. During this time, the human delegation continued their silent observation. They attended every emergency session, documented every failed attempt, recorded every moment of increasing panic. Not once did they offer advice or assistance. They had been told their input was not wanted, and they respected that decision with perfect adherence to the Council's wishes. the breaking point came when the shadow plague reached the stellar convergence itself. The station's defensive screens, powered by technology that had protected it for 5,000 years, flickered and failed in moments. Evacuation became imperative, but the plague was moving faster than ships could escape. In the chaos, Counselor Urix of the Ethereals approached the human delegation. Her energy form flickered with desperate patterns. Ambassador Rivera, surely humanity has some insight into this phenomenon. You tried to warn us. You must have studied it. Please, billions of lives are at stake. Marcus looked at her with an expression of polite confusion. Counselor Urix, the Galactic Council determined that humanity's concerns about the Shadow Plague were primitive paranoia. We were instructed to focus on our own small territories and leave galactic matters to qualified species. We have followed those instructions precisely. But you must have continued your research. You must have developed defenses. Marcus's expression remained neutral. The Council made it very clear that human perspectives on galactic security were neither needed nor wanted. We would not presume to contradict the wisdom of species that have guided this galaxy for millennia. As instructed, we have confined our activities to our 3 small colonies. Corthax himself approached, his scales now cycling through colors of desperation. Ambassador, I acknowledge that the Council may have been hasty in dismissing your warnings. But surely humanity would not stand by while entire civilizations are destroyed. Marcus met the Supreme Arbiters for eyes steadily. Supreme Arbiter, humanity has stood by for exactly 1 year, 3 months, and 6 days. We have attended every council session. We have paid every fee. We have followed every directive. We have done exactly what the Council demanded, nothing more, nothing less. The safety of the galaxy is, as you made abundantly clear, the responsibility of the qualified species. The station shook as another defensive system failed. In the distance, the strange non-light of the Shadow Plague crept closer. Corthax's voice broke with something that might have been despair or rage. You would let us all die to prove a point. Asterisk, the station shook as another defensive system failed. In the distance, the strange non-light of the Shadow Plague crept closer. Corthax's voice broke with something that might have been despair or rage. You would let us all die to prove a point. For the first time in over a year, Marcus smiled. Was not a pleasant expression. No, Supreme Arbiter. We would never let you all die. But the Council needs to understand something fundamental. Humanity detected this threat 18 months ago. We developed countermeasures 15 months ago. We've been protecting our colonies successfully for the past year. We also protected 17 major trade routes, 63 research stations, and approximately 2 trillion beings from various species, all without the Council's knowledge or permission. The assembled councillors stood in stunned silence. Vrex's translator struggled to convey his shock. That's impossible. We would have detected such large-scale operations. Marcus gestured to his team. For the first time in over a year, they activated their equipment. Holographic displays filled the chamber with data, thousands of operations, millions of saved lives. An entire shadow war fought in the margins, while the Council debated trade regulations. Human ships had been everywhere, invisible and unacknowledged, holding back the plague through methods the Council would have deemed too primitive, too violent, too human. Commander Sarah Chen, Marcus's second, spoke for the first time in the Council chamber. The Shadow Plague is not a natural phenomenon. It's a weapon deployed by an extragalactic intelligence that has been probing our defenses for decades. They target what they perceive as the dominant species first, which is why they ignored humanity initially. They saw us as you did, primitive, unimportant, not worth immediate attention. That blindness gave us the opportunity to study them, to develop countermeasures, to prepare defenses. Dr. James Okonkwo, the mission's chief scientist, added his own revelation. The plague can be stopped, but it requires a combination of approaches that the Council would never have approved: controlled quantum detonations to disrupt their dimensional anchors, biological weapons that would horrify your ethics committees, psychological warfare that exploits their collective consciousness, methods that advanced civilizations would consider barbaric. The station shook again. The shadow plague was minutes away from breaching the final barriers. Around them, representatives of 22 species faced the immediate prospect of extinction. Korthax's scales had turned pure white, a color that hadn't been seen on a Zelithian in recorded history. It indicated complete surrender. Asterisk. Marcus stood straighter. Humanity wants a vote. A real vote. The shadow plague threatens every biological species in this galaxy. We can stop it, but only if the Council acknowledges that sometimes primitive solutions are exactly what's needed. Sometimes paranoia is just pattern recognition. Sometimes the youngest species might see dangers that older eyes have learned to overlook. The vote was called immediately. Should humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with equal voice in all security matters? For the first time in galactic history, the vote was unanimous, 23 species in favor. The moment the vote concluded, the human delegation sprang into action. Chen began issuing orders to human fleets that had been holding position just outside sensor range. Okonkwo initiated protocols that had been prepared months in advance. Within minutes, the shadow plague's advance halted. Within hours, it began. To retreat, the counterattack was swift, brutal, and utterly effective. Human ships appeared throughout the galaxy, no longer hiding their presence. They deployed weapons that violated 6 different council treaties on warfare. They used tactics that would have been considered war crimes under normal circumstances. They fought with a savage efficiency that reminded every species why humanity had survived on a death world for millions of years before reaching the stars. But they also showed mercy. They rescued survivors from plague-touched worlds. They shared their defensive technology freely. They taught other species how to fight an enemy that didn't follow the rules of civilized warfare. They proved that sometimes survival required getting primitive. 3 months later, the shadow plague had been driven back beyond the galactic edge. The extragalactic intelligence that had deployed it sent a single message before retreating into the void: we did not know the primitive ones were yours to protect. We will not return. The stellar convergence had been rebuilt, but the council chamber looked different now. The human delegation no longer sat in a corner. Their section was integrated with the others, their voices given equal weight in all discussions. Marcus Rivera had been offered the position of Supreme Arbiter, which he politely declined. Humanity didn't want to rule, they wanted to contribute. During the first session of the Reformed Council, Korthax, now serving as a junior counselor, by his own request, asked Marcus a question that had been bothering him. You could have told us immediately when the shadow plague began spreading. You could have forced us to listen. Why did you wait? Marcus considered his answer carefully. Because the council needed to learn a lesson that no amount of talking could have taught. Age doesn't always equal wisdom. Technology doesn't always equal understanding. Sometimes the youngest child in the room is the only one who can see that the emperor has no clothes. You dismissed us because we were young, violent, and primitive. But those same qualities, our youth that makes us question everything, our violence that lets us face hard truths, our primitive nature that keeps us connected to basic survival instincts, those were exactly what the galaxy needed. Chen added her own perspective. Every species in this council achieved dominance by being the most adaptive on their home world. But success made you comfortable. Comfort made you complacent. Complacency nearly got you killed. Humanity is still uncomfortable in space. We still see threats everywhere because we haven't been here long enough to assume we're safe. That paranoia, as you called it, saved your lives. The session continued with genuine collaboration for the first time in millennia. Young species were given voices in discussions. Old species reconsidered assumptions they had held for thousands of years. The galaxy had learned that wisdom could come from unexpected sources, and that sometimes the most primitive solution was the most effective one. As the council adjourned, Urix approached Marcus one final time. Her energy form pulsed with curiosity. Tell me honestly, Ambassador, if we had continued to refuse your help, if we had maintained our arrogance, even as the plague consumed us, would humanity have saved us anyway? Marcus looked at her for a long moment before answering. Yes, we would have saved you. But we would have waited until the very last possible second, just to make absolutely certain the lesson was learned. Because a galaxy that dismisses any voice as unworthy of being heard is a galaxy doomed to fall to threats it cannot see coming. Today, the threat was the shadow plague. Tomorrow, it might be something else. The only way to survive is to listen to everyone, even the primitive newcomers, who see shadows where you see nothing. The human delegation left the chamber, but this time they walked among the other species as equals. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Sometimes silence was not compliance, but preparation. Sometimes the youngest voice carried the most important warning, and sometimes being primitive enough to see danger everywhere was the most advanced survival. Trait of all, in the years that followed, humanity's approach to galactic security became the new standard. Not because it was perfect, but because it was adaptive. It combined the wisdom of age with the energy of youth, the sophistication of technology with the raw instinct for survival. The shadow plague never returned, but other threats emerged, and each time they were met by a united galaxy that had learned to value every voice, no matter how young or primitive it might seem. The Council's records would forever mark the day humanity went silent as the beginning of a new era, not because humanity had withdrawn, but because their silence had forced the galaxy to hear what it had been missing all along. In the end, the most powerful statement humanity ever made was the 1 year, 3 months, and 6 days when they said nothing at all.